Hey, welcome everybody. Everyone doing well? Enjoying that nice weather out here? All right, good. Hey, so I'm just getting so much feedback. From all of you guys, I just want to, quiet you guys down real quick. We're going to get started. My name is Gabe. Thank you so much for coming tonight. Welcome to Kaleo. This is summertime Kaleo. It looks different. It feels different. But what I love about it is because we have so many kids who go to CMU, so many students who go to CMU, and they go home to other parts of Colorado or other parts of the country, and they enjoy time with their families. So that first announcement was just basically saying, stay connected. There's a way that we're going to do that online via social media, and we're going to do some different kind of web discussions and music events online that are going to help people feel at home even when they're far away. But the other thing that's really cool about this summer, though, is that people come back who are going to school in other places, and I see some of you, and welcome back to you. I can see a couple of you really clearly who I know are here, and so thanks for being here, man. It's really exciting. And also, just so you guys know, Kaleo, it means to be called. We believe here at Kaleo, like Tim said, that you have a call on your life to do something for God. We want to help you figure out what that is and give you an opportunity to do that in the world. So that's why we exist as a service. And then also we partner with other campus ministries. And one of the campus ministries we partner with is called FCA. It's the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. And they are actually doing an event. Do you guys like JUCO? Anybody like big into JUCO? Yeah, I love JUCO. So there's this event going on. It's on Sunday at 9. It's going to be a breakfast at the DoubleTree. It's on Horizon Drive. It's from 9 to 11. I think it's like $20 a person for like a massive breakfast buffet. And then you get to see all the JUCO players are going to be invited to this thing as well. And there's going to be a guest speaker, an athlete, ex-baseball athlete. It's going to be a really fun event. And it's going to support FCA. So we love to do things that support Young Life, FCA, InterVarsity, and the myriad of other campus ministries that are a part of Colorado Mesa University. So if you have nowhere to be this Sunday at 9, you should go check that out. I think I'm going to go. So I'm a firm maybe that I'm going, and you might see me there. So anyway, we're going to get started. We're actually finishing up the series, the Followers series, and if you have been following along in your Followers study guide, it's been really cool because it's a very nice supplement to keep you talking about the topics that we've been on all throughout the week. If you haven't done that, you can still check it out. The PDF version of it's available online, and we have some copies in the back. It's just a really nice devotion to do because if you guys are like me, sometimes reading your Bible doesn't come so naturally or so easily. And I have a plan on my phone. It texts me the reminder. It's like, hey, you remember you're supposed to read this? And then it texts me the next day, and then it's finally like, did you die? Like my phone's like, are you still alive? Because you're not reading, and it makes me feel guilty. But we have the Follower Study Guide, and it's not going to text you, so that's really cool. So just to kind of recap with you what we've been going through, it's been a 6-week series. We first started talking about God's story, the big story of God, the grand narrative, and how we're living as a part of God's greater design and greater story. We talked about spiritual disciplines, what it means to pray consistently, what it means to spend time separating yourself and talking to God or listening to God, just different things that will help you grow as a follower of Christ. How to read the Bible, why to read the Bible. We talked about the church over the past couple of weeks, about the global church, that the church is a movement that is going all across the world. People are hearing the gospel of Jesus and responding to it, and that it's much bigger than what we see in this room. It's much bigger than what we see in our community. However, our community is our responsibility. Remember, we talked about how the local church is the hope of the world. And so the community that we live in, where God has placed us here in Grand Junction, Colorado, we have a responsibility to go and to serve this community and to proclaim the gospel to this community. And so we know that not only do we have a responsibility to help globally, but we also have a responsibility to help locally. And so tonight we're going to talk about multiply and serve, what it means kind of to live out the Great Commission that Jesus said to his disciples, right? Go Go into the world, all the world, and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey all these things I've commanded you, right? And he says that is what we are here to do. That is our responsibility. That is not a great suggestion, right? That's not an unless you're too busy. That is something that we're all called to do. And the way it looks different for different people, but we're all called to do something to build the kingdom. And that's just the way it goes. And I think for me, as we're talking about multiplying and serving in the church, serving in the community, serving the people around us, it really comes down to love. And I think I grew up in church, and I think I've gotten a mixed message of what loving my neighbor means. I did have a neighbor that lived a street above me that I thought was super cute as I was growing up in the Ridges. That's not what it meant. And, that never materialized, obviously, because I was pretty nerdy, but that's okay. What it means to love your neighbor, because I was a part of this church, and I grew up in this one church pretty much my whole childhood, my whole little kid, all the way to teenager, and even after that part of my life. And I had done a whole bunch of community outreach stuff. Have you guys ever done something like that? Like our church, one of the big things we used to do when I was a kid was we would put on this big Easter egg hunt for kids at a park, and it would be like thousands of eggs, and we give away bicycles and give away food, and it would be all free, and the community could just come and grab some food and just enjoy. And we did all these things where we fed people, we clothed people. At one time our church opened up a thrift store, and we realized that opening up a local business is not easy in any way, shape, or form, and that closed immediately. But for a while there, we were giving clothes, helping people find clothing, and then we were just trying to meet people's needs, and we do that even today. There's nothing really wrong with that either. There's nothing wrong with these one-time events, these where you come into a neighborhood or you go into an area and your whole goal is to show the love of Christ, right? And so there's nothing really wrong with going in and just serving people and meeting their needs once, but there's nothing really wrong with it in and of itself, but I don't think that is the fullness of loving your neighbor. Does that make sense? It's sort of like if you've ever been on a missions trip. One thing I love about Kaleo is that we went to Thailand last year, and then we're going to go again this year. We're going to follow up, and it's not just like we come, we blitz this community, we do all this stuff, and then we're like, oh, okay, see ya, and then we leave and never come back. We support these missionaries on a continual basis, and we're going back yearly. Daniel Backert's leading a team to go next Christmas break, so if you guys want to go, you should get with him. He's the bass player. He's probably just the best looking dude in this room, so I'll just describe it that way so you can know exactly who I'm talking about. But the problem with doing these things of this nature, these community service projects, these community outreaches, is that they can get skewed. Their purpose and their focus is so easy to get thrown off. Because what was meant to serve the needs of a person can actually serve our own egos, right? What was meant to be helping people actually can sometimes become something that we can pat ourselves on the back for doing. And we can make even something that's supposed to be about everybody else, about us. You know what I'm talking about? Because our sinful nature is where the root of where selfishness comes from, where self-centeredness comes from. It comes from sin. And the sin nature that was in us because of the fall of Adam and Eve that lived in every generation before us and lives in us as well. Our natural tendency when we're operating in that sinful nature is to take things that are good and make them about me. And I think you know what I'm talking about. We don't even really know we're doing this, but a great example is I've said this several times, Tom's shoes, it's so great. We buy a pair and then a kid gets a pair and it's you're pretty much just buying the shoes because you like the shoes and you like the way you feel walking around so socially conscious with my Tom's shoes, it quickly becomes about me. even though it's supposed to be serving somebody else. So the question at that point becomes, am I loving my neighbor, or am I feeling, or am I loving the feeling of doing something kind? Because every time you do something kind, it does feel good, right? And it is self-gratifying. But we can even use something like social justice or something like community outreach to make ourselves feel good. And that was not the original intent. And I don't think that that's the fullness of loving our neighbor. So tonight we're going to take a step towards genuine love. Because if I'm being honest with you, because we are broken people, because you and I, not just you, but you and I, we all have issues, right? And because of that, we don't even really get the fullness of love, how to receive love, even the love from the Father, and how to give love to people freely or without condition. It's just not something that comes natural for us because of the world that we live in. And so tonight, I'm not so bold as to say that I'm going to fix this problem, and then all of a sudden we're going to leave here and we're going to just know how to love people and serve people to the fullest extent. But what I am saying is that tonight, I would like to take a step in the right direction. I'd like to take a step towards loving people in a genuine way, because love comes from God. That's what we do know, because God is love, right? It comes from God, and what can happen is it can move through us to those around us. And that's the system that works. When it's done out of His love coming and flooding our lives, and out of the overflow of that coming to the people around us, that's what works. And tonight I'd love to take a step in the right direction. But before we do that, we're going to pray. Father, I thank you for what you're doing in the hearts and the lives of your people. Lord, as we truly just endeavor to take a step towards loving people the way you want us to, God, we're just going to be honest right from the beginning and say that we need your help. And Lord, where we fall short, God, would your grace just cover that empty space that we can't fill. And God, would you fill in the gap where we come up short, Lord, would you deliver? And would you teach us how to love your sons and your daughters, both those who are in your church, in your fold, and those who are outside of it, on the outside looking in? Will you show us how to love like you love, and how to serve the way that you came and served? In your name we pray. Amen. So one of the things I love about Jesus, one of the many things that I just find so fascinating as I read through the Gospels, reading the words of Christ, is that he has the ability to be deeply profound and yet beautifully simple. The words of Jesus, they have the ability to be so profound and so countercultural and so the opposite of the way that we see the world around us playing itself out. And yet so simple that it's something that we can grasp onto, and it's something that we can understand. And as I'm setting up for Matthew chapter 22, I want to kind of let you know what's going on. We spent a lot of time around this time frame of Jesus' life in the 168 Hours series. And it's for a good reason, because so much of the crazy things that Jesus says come in this one chunk of his life, this last week of his life. He says some of the most impactful words that were ever written in this time. And so Jesus is teaching a group of people, as he often did. He came in contact with religious leaders, and I think you probably know the drill. By this point, Jesus has said things and done things and acted in such a way that the religious leaders are just ticked off. They're not a fan of Jesus. They're not picking up what he's putting down. You know what I mean? Like, they're not really feeling him. And a Pharisee begins to ask this question because what he's trying to do is trap Jesus. Have you ever watched a media, like a press conference before? And these guys, these media people are trained to ask questions in such a way that they get an answer that will appease them, right? They train themselves to ask questions in such a way that they'll expose any type of ignorance or any type of foul play or anything that the person that they're interviewing may be getting themselves involved in. And this is kind of what's going on. This Pharisee is asking this question, but it's to trap him by his own response. And you'll know what I'm talking about here in a second. It's Matthew chapter 22, verse 36. It goes like this. Teacher, which is the great commandment in the law? So he's trying to trap Jesus, because no matter what he answers to that, I think the thought process is, well, if he says, well, I think this is the greatest, and then the Pharisee can come back and say, oh, so you don't think this is important then? You know what I'm saying? Do you understand what I'm saying? He's trying to trap him in his own response. In verse 37, and he said to him, this is Jesus saying to the Pharisees, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the great and first commandment. So Jesus gives a very direct answer. In verse 39, and a second is like it, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments depend all the law and the prophets. So what I love about Jesus is he doesn't shy away from answering this question directly. He's not trying to give a politically correct answer. He's not trying to do it in such a way. Have you ever heard how people respond to those things? Because just as these media journalists are really paid, and their craft is to ask these questions in such a way to trap people, people who talk to the media are trained and equipped to answer these questions in such a way where they speak a lot of words and they say nothing, right? And so Jesus doesn't do that. He says, you want to know what the greatest is? This is the greatest, that you would love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. He says, that's the first. And the second greatest, he even says, you ask for the top one, I'll give you the top two. Second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. And every law that the prophets or that the law and the prophets, they hang on these two things. So every law, every command that's ever been given in the Old Testament, all of them, actually, if you boil them down to their least common denominator, that's where they get to. Loving God and loving others. Jesus makes it super clear that love for God and love for others is the best way that we can serve him. And so recently, I personally have gotten into podcasts where I'm listening to some podcasts of people from all over the spectrum theologically, and it's really challenging me on what I think and what I believe about certain issues of the faith. But what's so awesome to me is I'm getting real deep into these things, like guys who used to be pastors and now are agnostics, and why they believe what they believe and things like that. It's very challenging, but at the end of the day, I know that everything that's ever been written in the Bible can be reduced down to, do I love God with everything I have? And do I love my neighbor as myself? And I know that I haven't mastered those two things, and I know that if I keep working on those two things for the rest of my life, I'll probably be okay. It's something that you can rest your head on. You can rest on that. And he also said about love is that is the only way that everyone's going to be able to tell that we represent him. He says, by your love for one another, that people are going to be able to tell that you're my disciples, that you're my followers. That's in John 13:35, if you want to read that later. He says, the way that everyone will know that you represent me is by the love you have for one another. So it's a pretty big deal. And so when we talk about serving, though, because love and serving are kind of two different things, but the way I would describe serving is that serving is love in action, okay? Serving is love not only in word, but in deed. Does that make sense? So if we're willing to serve somebody, if I'm willing to serve my wife, then I'll get up, when the baby's crying at night, right? I'll change that diaper. We don't have diapers anymore, thank goodness, but I still have to wipe my kids' butts, though, so it's we just got one step out, and now we're not there yet. We're not out of the woods just yet. But love is not only do I say I love you, but let me do an action that shows you that I love you, right? And so it's like this, because I love God, that's why I try to stick to those reading plans. That's why I practice the spiritual disciplines. Out of a love for God. It's not just about the action, it's about what's behind it. Love is the driving force for me to serve God. And so, because of my love for God, even though he loved me first, but my response is to love him back. Because I love God, that's why I try to spend time in his word. That's why I separate myself from everyone else and try to pray. Right? It's not to check off the checklist. It's not because he won't accept me if I don't do these things, but it's out of a love for him and a desire to know him more and a desire to follow him more closely that I do these things. So that's loving the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, with every bit of you. You're desiring and trying and striving to know God more. Because the more you know him, the more you love him. It's just the way he is. It's his nature. And the same could be true of that second part. Because I love others, right? The motivating factor. Because I love others, that's why we do things like TFAB here at the church once a month. It's on a Thursday afternoon. We give out food to people who are in need. We just make a little food bank right here, and people come and pick up like a grocery cart full of food. And then we take the groceries out to their car, we help them load it in the car, and we say a prayer for them. And see, that's something that like you could do that, and I could tell you guys got to do this, because it makes you feel so good, right? But that's not really serving, or that's not really loving your neighbor if the driving force is not because I love these people, because I love my community, because I desire that my community would know and experience the love of Jesus Christ. That's why I serve. Because I desire for the people in Thailand to come to a saving knowledge of Jesus Christ and to have that love be poured out on them. That's why I'm spending my own resources, my own time to raise funds, to travel across the world to spread the love to people. Not because it's a great traveling experience and my friends are going and it's going to be super fun, right? Because that's going to happen, it's true. But what's the driving force behind what you do? If the driving force is not love, it's not truly serving. And it's a very fine line between loving your neighbor and loving the way it feels to do something good for someone, right? And I think so the question is now, well, how do I serve? How do I serve? Because the church provides you with many avenues to serve, and I'll say the no-brainers are, go sign up. If Wednesdays is your main service where you come and this fills you up for the rest of your week, and you want to serve, come serve on a weekend. Youth ministry needs help. Children's ministry needs help. Nursery needs help. There's all kinds of areas. This TFAP thing, we could always use more help doing those things. The garden needs help. The ropes course there's so many places you can serve, right? But besides that, how do I serve? How can I love in a way that's more than just words? How can I translate it from words to words and deed? And how can I resist that selfish gain? And I believe that Jesus gives us some insight into this in Luke chapter 10, because Jesus and his disciples, Jesus and his homies are walking to Jerusalem. They're journeying to Jerusalem. And Jesus asks, this is right after he says, you need to count the cost before you follow me, because the ravens have their nests and the fox have their dens, but the Son of Man, meaning Jesus, has no place to lay his head. He's like, it's going to cost you something to truly follow me. And this is right after he says that. Then Luke chapter 10, verse 1 through 9 says this. After Jesus told them to count the cost, he appointed 72 others and sent them on ahead of him, 2 by 2, into every town and place where he himself was about to go. So he sent out these teams of people, totaling 72 guys. And he said to them, the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore, pray earnestly to the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest. Go your way. Behold, I am sending you out as lambs in the midst of wolves. Does that sound like it's going to be easy? Sound like it's going to be fun? Not really. Carry no money bag, no knapsack, no sandals, and greet no one on the road. So he's saying, just you're on a mission. You want to pack light. You want to travel light. Whatever house you enter, first say, peace be to this house. And if a son of peace is there, your peace will rest upon him. But if not, it will return to you. So what he's saying there is, whenever you greet somebody with peace. And if they're people of the faith, they're going to be like, oh yeah, it's going to be like, we're brothers. And if not, it's kind of like Anchorman, right? He's like, I'm just going to throw this out there. And if you don't like it, just throw it right back. They're going to be like, nope. And that he's saying that's going to happen. And verse 7 says, and remain in the same house, eating and drinking what they provide. For the laborer deserves his wages. Do not go from house to house. Whenever you enter a town and they receive you, eat what is set before you. And then listen to this. Heal the sick in it and say to them, the kingdom of God has come near to you. So Jesus, he's saying a couple of different things here. One of the things he's saying is that we're not only supposed to serve, but we're also supposed to teach others how to serve. So when we talked about last week how in Ephesians chapter 4 that we are supposed to equip the saints, that like why a pastor exists, why the prophets and the evangelists and the teachers, why they exist, is to equip the saints, which are you, right, to do the work of ministry. So what my job is to teach you how to do the work and to teach you how to teach somebody else how to do the work. So we're all called to do the work of ministry, and we're also called to serve, and we're called to teach other people how to serve. That's why he sent out not just his original 12, but he sent out the 72. So Jesus does give some instructions, some expectations, but if you really kind of boil all that down, what you realize is that it starts with a relational dynamic, right? Like it starts with you looking a person in the eye and greeting them, like he was saying, peace be with you, peace be with your home. And he says basically when they invite you in their home, eat whatever they eat. Because for Jewish people, it was a big deal to not eat certain things, right? You know that? And so he's saying, whenever they invite you in, eat whatever they eat and drink whatever they drink. Like, don't get caught up, and that's not the way we do things. That's not just find a way to find common ground with these people. Find a way to make sure that you are relationally, like you're getting along, where there's peace between you, and where you're actually able to start to have a conversation. And so if there's one thing I want you to take away from tonight, it's this. It's really simple. You can't serve who you don't see. And why I say that, I mean, I think that sounds, and if you're a literal person, like I'm a literal person, so I'm going to have to go back and explain myself, because I'm like, well, we can send money like all across the world, right? We don't have to see to serve. But when I'm talking about exactly what we've been talking about this entire time, of loving your neighbor, of where it's for them and it's not for selfish gain, where it's the driving force behind your service is love, you can't serve somebody that you don't see. What he's saying is like, you have to see them. You can't look at them as, like we're doing this Jesus multi-level marketing scheme, right? And I'll train 2 people, and those 2 people will get 2 disciples under them, right? And it quickly becomes like this game where we're trying to like build our, our networking, and we get like a BMW at the end of it or something. Like that's not what he's saying. You have to see them. They're not a number. They're a soul. And you have to see, because you have no idea what people have been through. And you have no idea how hard it is for some of us to even be sitting in this room right now. Do you know that? Like some of us have been hurt so badly by the church or by religious people. that even for us to get back to a point where they will listen to what you have to say, they will listen to the gospel, you have to do tremendous relational investing in somebody before you can even get back to square one where they might listen to you. Does that make sense? If you really want to love your neighbor, you have to see them as a person holistically because they have been hurt. They have been through some stuff and they've seen some things that make them want to be as far away from this building as possible, right? And honestly, if you had a conversation with me, microphones off, we're sitting at my kitchen table, I could tell you some things that have happened in the church that regarded the way I felt about Christians and about church that would probably make your jaw drop. My wife and I could tell you story after story of the way we've been burned by the church. And yet, the driving factor of all that we invest our lives into is the love for God and the love for his people. So the unfortunate thing about our society, and why I say that is because I think inherently we all know that, right? We know that people, as we're trying to invite to cell groups, if you get an invitation to a cell group, it's not just because we're having a race to try to build the biggest cell group, okay? It's because we want you to experience the power of building the church one relationship at a time. Because if you remember from last week, you are the church. This building is not the church. You are the church. And I know that this is inherently something that we know, and deep down we understand this. But why I have to even say that is because our society is a place where we have the ability to see only what we want to see, right? Because if you don't like commercials, you just get Netflix, dude. I think that cable TV is not going to be a thing in the next 25 years probably, unless they do some major changes. If you don't want commercials, you don't have commercials. If you get Dish Network and you get the Hopper, right? And you can DVR and fast forward through those suckers, right? You can find a way to see only what you want to see. Your Facebook feed, because some of us are too nice to just unfriend somebody, right? But they have the little thing where you can click so you don't have to see any more of their junk anymore, because they're talking about all the games that they play or all this drama, and I'm like, hide that, you know what I mean? We don't have, the world that we live in, we can see only what we want to see. The news and the media, we can mute that. If things are getting too discouraging, we can turn that off. I don't have a newspaper subscription. Dude, I can block myself out from all the stuff in the world that I don't want to see. But what would happen? What would happen if our society, if we began to see into the lives of those around us? What would happen if I didn't just know your face, but I knew your story? How would that change the way that you treated people? How would that change the way that you look at people in terms of whether or not they're going to follow Christ? My guess is if you were to sit and have a conversation with somebody who doesn't follow Jesus, you would find yourself breaking for that person. Because they have a story, right? And you have to see people before you can serve people. Because and you know what? The other thing is you're not going to be able. It's not like when you're trying to invite. I used to be in a band back in the day, believe it or not, and we used to invite people to concerts. So I'd go to my high school and just flyers everywhere, right? That doesn't work. In trying to bring people into the kingdom, it's one relationship at a time, one conversation at a time, one act of kindness, one act of love where it has nothing to do with you, but you're just serving another person, one event at a time. that will show this world, because Jesus says it so plainly in John 13:35, that's how they're going to know that you represent me, is by the love that you have for one another. And I'll tell you, it's not easy. It's so much easier to just spray flyers all over the place, right? But it's an actual investment in time. And I think that really is the way to serve. That really is the way to begin to walk down this path of discipleship, is that he was basically saying, okay, you guys are disciples. That means that you believe that Jesus is who he says he is. And these 72 guys that he sent out into all these villages, they were on board, okay? So they were like many of us are in this room. They were on board. Like, you don't have to convince them that Jesus died and that he rose again. Like, these are the guys that were like, I was there. You don't have to convince me. And what he's telling them is, you need to go into all the world. You need to go into these villages and you need to see people. You need to greet them. You need to show love to them. You need to do what they do, eat what they eat. Make it easy for them to let their walls down so that my love can infiltrate the darkness in their heart. And there's no quick fix. There's no formula. There's no easy way to do it. It is just one relationship at a time. But that's how we build the kingdom. And by that's how the movement got started, was people loving people one person at a time. And I think the beginning of us loving our neighbor is seeing their life, seeing their hurts, seeing their dreams, seeing what makes them happy, what makes them sad, and inviting the love of God to fill up that empty space. And so my question is, who is your neighbor? Who are you called to serve? Because it really could be. And if we had the Thailand team come up here right now, they could sit there and tell you of how it made them feel to serve the people in Thailand with Ray and Candace. Maybe you're called to love your neighbor in Thailand. Maybe you're called to love your neighbor in the dorm room next to you. Maybe you're called to love the neighbor in your own family, at your workplace. Who is your neighbor? Pray with me tonight, please. Lord, my prayer and my hope is, God, that you would begin to drop on our hearts who we're supposed to love. Who is our neighbor that you're calling us to actually see them, God? We may pass by them on the street. We may say hi. We may hang out after work. We may study together. But maybe with the busyness of life, we've never taken the time to really see them and hear their heart and see into their brokenness. But Lord, I pray that you would show us who we are to love. We know we're supposed to love everyone all the time. But specifically, who are we supposed to serve? Who are we supposed to build a relationship with that we might one day, after hearing their heart and sharing our own heart and our own experiences, maybe one day that your love would fill in the darkness in their life, and that you would bring them to you, and that you would use us as an instrument to do that. God, I pray that you would help us. Help us to slow down enough to see somebody. We love you, Lord, and it's in your name we pray. Amen. Okay, so 2 things practically before we get ready to stand in worship. Is Jesus said it really plainly in Luke chapter 10. So the first thing is pray for the harvest. Because he says the harvest is plentiful, right? There are plenty of people who are ready, who are longing for something more. but the laborers are few. So begin to pray for those people that you know in your workplace, in your community, in your dorm room, everywhere that you come into contact with people. Begin to pray for those people who have yet to have the love of God just begin to infiltrate their life. And the second thing is this, is just see someone's situation outside of your own. So what I'm saying is, like, you guys, if you're like me, life is just like go, 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 and we're focused on the end game, right? Stop, slow down, see somebody, hear their story, hear their heart, and allow God to use you in that situation. Let's worship tonight, guys.